Vacation Tings is back in the building. Last few days, don't worry, I'll be back in my setup. But I wanted to take a little time as OTAs this week finished up and kind of not do a recap, but focus on some of the things that I think a lot of people aren't focusing as much. Now, you guys in my comments have been pointing it out. I've been saying it in my videos, but I think it's becoming more and more apparent that, look, Shedeur Sanders and Deshaun Watson are working on completely two different things, right? I think Shedeur Sanders has taken a very great approach at whether the coaches are telling them directly or he's taking it.
Everybody's been watching Deshaun Watson. Everybody's been tracking every rep, every throw, every moment he steps back onto a football field after everything this franchise has been through. But while the cameras were pointed at him, something else was quietly happening on the other side of the field, something that a lot of people in Cleveland media don't want to say out loud yet, something the analytics crowd swore was impossible. Something that a kid from Colorado, a kid with the most famous last name in football, has been methodically building, rep by rep, day by day. Shedeur Sanders isn't just competing for a starting job anymore. He's changing the conversation entirely. And the question no one's asking, but everyone should be, is this: what happens when the guy they said couldn't do the little things starts doing all of them?
We know the deep balls are amazing. We know when you stepped on the football field, big plays started happening. We're not really worried about you stretching the football field. What we want to see you is, hey, take the layup. Shout out to Tyvis Powell. I think he said it pretty good as well. Like, we're not afraid that, or we don't. We all know Shedeur can make it happen, right? If I have my "it get dangerous" button, I will, you know what I'm saying, I will let the people hear it. But I want to speak to it. Now, one of my favorite, coaches, I think he's technically a part of Cleveland media.
Let's be honest about what Shedeur Sanders walked into Cleveland carrying. The critiques weren't quiet. They were loud. They were everywhere. Drifts in the pocket, takes too many sacks, won't take what the defense gives him, has to make the big play instead of the right play, can't read film at this level, will never start, will never win, will be cut before the 2025 season even begins. That was the narrative, not a small one, a defining one. And layered underneath all of it was the shadow of Deshaun Sanders, the idea that Shedeur's success at Colorado was more about his father's culture and less about him, that he hadn't been tested, that the real NFL would expose him. Now add Deshaun Watson to this picture, a man who, just 1 year ago, people said would never play again, who has now become a Pro Bowl caliber player, rewriting franchise records. The bar to even be in the conversation with Watson is astronomically high. So the question becomes, what does Shedeur Sanders do with all of that weight? Apparently, he gets to work.
There are criticisms about Shedeur coming out of last season, obviously drifting in the pocket, takes too many sacks, right? And then obviously this mindset that he won't take what the defense gives to him. Well, here he is, getting through his progressions quickly, making a decision quickly, right? Instead of, we might see a Shedeur that, hey, let's make something big happen. In Shedeur Sanders' own words, I want to throw a dog a bone. Instead, what does he do? He doesn't drift. He works the pocket. And again, this is on air, nothing big, but again, perfect to see that, hey, look, these are small mindset changes that are.
Here's where it gets interesting. Coach Lance Rézland, a former high school coach, now one of the most respected Cleveland football analysts, has been breaking down Shedeur's OTA tape piece by piece, and what he's seeing isn't just improvement, it's intentional improvement, targeted, precise. Red zone, Shedeur keeps a play alive and finds Boston late in his progression. That's not instinct, that's discipline. That's a quarterback who worked through a read, didn't panic, and trusted the process. Then there's the dig route to Levarden. Play action, jet motion fake, footwork working left to right, eyes off the defender, and then, boom, he finds the dig on the back end, threading it between linebackers with timing in ball placement that puts the receiver in space to extend and run. Here's what that means. That is the exact throw people said he couldn't make consistently. Not the deep ball, we already knew about that. Not the scramble play, we knew about that too. The intermediate throw over linebackers, the layup, the take what the defense gives you moment that separated average QBs from efficient ones. He's taking the layup now. Quote, Sanders does a great job getting the ball out on time and placing it where only his receiver can make a play. Excellent timing and accuracy. And then the play that might be the most underrated moment of these OTAs, the touchdown to Taylon Wallace. Play action fakes so good the linebackers bit. Pocket presence, 1 read, 2 reads, boom. Ball placed above 3 defenders, in space, in front of Wallace, so he can run under it and get vertical immediately. Count it. That's a score.
Right now, you see his head? I don't know if you can see it down there. He hears, he snapped. Now he's at the middle of the field. Now he's reading the middle of the field. What he's seeing is, okay, this option might be a little covered up right here behind 42. But then, as 2 is known to do, he sees space. He says, oh, I have a dig coming here. Now, Gage isn't open yet. You've got Justin Jefferson dropping down in this little zone, right? And by the way, shout out to Mr. Jefferson. He's been getting some first-team reps at linebacker. 3rd round pick out of Alabama, 3rd, 4th round pick. Hey,
This is the part they're not talking about enough. Football is 60% physical, but cornerback is 80% mental. And Shedeur Sanders' biggest battle has never been about arm talent. It's never been about athleticism. It's been about the mindset shift from a guy who wants to make something happen to a guy who lets the game come to him. In his own words, Shedeur has talked about wanting to throw the dog a bone, wanting to make that electric play, that moment that ignites a crowd, that throw that ends up on a highlight reel. That instinct is what makes him special, but that same instinct, unchecked, that's what causes the sack on 3rd and 5 when a 4-yard check down was right there. That's the drift in the pocket. That's the hesitation before the simple throw. What we're seeing at these OTAs is Shedeur Sanders learning, for the first time with a professional coaching staff fully behind him, how to weaponize his patience, how to use his explosiveness as a threat rather than a reflex. The footwork tells the story. When you watch him work left to right on play action, when you see him get through his progression in 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi, and release it, that's not a guy guessing. That's a guy who's been coached, who's been working, who's been intentional about answering the critics with reps instead of words. And here's what makes that more impressive. This is a new coaching staff. These are receivers he's still building chemistry with, like Taylon Wallace, brought over from Baltimore to be the gadget weapon, the savvy veteran route runner. And Shedeur is already wowing them. That's not just talent, that's leadership in real time.
we're hike. Boom, 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi. So 1, 2, 3. Shedeur is now at the top of his drop. He's hitching. He's looking in the middle of the field. 1, boom. Now he look at how he gets off of his targets, right? So boom, at 1 target and 2 target. Oh, boom! I see Taylon Wallace is there. I like what I see. I'm throwing it right now where 2 defenders are in front of him and another is behind it, and then just play.
Now pay attention here, because organizations don't lie. They hedge, they manage, they calculate. So when offensive coordinator Travis Switzer goes on record talking about Shedeur's growth, that's a signal. When head coach Ken Dorsey talks about his growth publicly, that's a signal. When Coach Rézland says, and I'm quoting here, "I thought Watson played extremely well, and Sanders and Watson both did really, really good in the pocket with their feet," that is a cosign that places Shedeur in the same breath as Deshaun Watson. Not behind him, not a backup, the same breath. And Ginny Haslam, the owner of this franchise, has been public about what he's watching. A young quarterback learning what it means to be a professional. That framing matters. That's not how you talk about a player you're moving on from. That's how you talk about a player you're building around. But here's where it gets really interesting. Shedeur Sanders is getting first-team reps. He is competing, not on paper, on the actual practice field against a man who by almost every measure should be the unquestioned starter of this team going into this season. And the competition is real. I just know in my heart that at some point this year, that kid's going to be thrust into the starting job, and I think he's going to surprise a lot of people. He looks 1,000% better than last year at this time. Big RZ. That's not a homer take. That's someone who has watched this quarterback closely, watched the tape, watched the trajectory, and is saying something has genuinely changed.
Let's zoom all the way out now. If Shedeur Sanders continues this trajectory, if these aren't just OTA flashes, but a genuine, consistent, sustainable development arc, then the Cleveland Browns are sitting on something that the entire NFL was not expecting. they potentially have two legitimate starting quarterbacks. That creates pressure in a locker room. It creates conversation. It creates a competition that isn't manufactured for headlines. It's earned on the practice field. And for Shedeur specifically, the stakes couldn't be higher because the critics have already written their version of this story, the version where he doesn't stick, where the NFL is too much, too fast, where the Sanders name could only carry him so far. But what happens when the story writes itself differently? Kay Cabot, one of the most respected and longest-tenured beat reporters covering this franchise, said it plainly. Shedeur Sanders is a gamer. He plays on natural instincts. When the lights are on and it's time to march downfield, he gets in a zone. And last year, with a line held together with smoke and mirrors, throwing to receivers he barely knew, he showed up in clutch situations. That was without the reps, without the coaching staff fully unlocking him, without the time in the lab. Now he has all of it. What does Shedeur Sanders look like with a year of professional development, a coaching staff that believes in him, first-team reps in competition, and the chip of 1,000 critics still sitting on his shoulder? That's the question the NFL should be asking. That's the question Cleveland already knows the answer to.
We started this with a question. What happens when the guy they said couldn't do the little things starts doing all of them? Here's your answer. The pocket doesn't drift anymore. The reads come faster. The ball is placed where only his receiver can get it. The dig is there. The play action is sharp. The layup is taken. And suddenly, the quarterback nobody believed in is making a brand new coaching staff look at each other and say, we might actually have something here. The critics wrote their narrative early. They wrote it loud. They wrote it with confidence. Shedeur Sanders is writing his with reps. And right now, his version is looking a whole lot more compelling. 2 is different. Always has been. Some of that comes with the name, but most of it, that's him, that aura, that gamer mentality, that it factor in pressure moments. The pressure is only going to mount from here, and pressure, as we're learning, is exactly what makes this diamond shine.